I'm almost 2 weeks since finishing up the big race I've been training for since January 4th, which is the Western States 100. I'm wearing the race T-shirt, and like I've been doing just pre-race, I did a four-part installment of lessons from the trail, and now that I've done the race, I want to share some post-race lessons from the trail that I think are specifically relevant to startup founders, people that are working at startups. If you're running and building and growing and ramping and scaling a startup, there's so many analogies for me that I want to share as it relates to running an ultra marathon, because like truly running a startup and trying to get from zero customers, zero product, is just starting with an idea to a place where you're making a true impact for your customers. It's feels like a sprint all the time. You're always sprinting from one phase to the next, but really it is an ultra marathon because that journey is long and arduous and ups and downs and lots of obstacles along the way. So here, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and kick off. I've got, over the last couple of weeks, I've been jotting down lots of ideas, sketching them out, and I've really kind of condensed these into 10 specific lessons that I want to share with you, lessons from the trail, startup lessons from the trail. I'm not going to get through all 10 in this first installment. We'll probably get through about 3 of them, and then I'll just do a couple more of these as we roll along. So if you're listening to the podcast, you can go back and listen to some of the previous episodes from the pre-race lessons from the trail, and you might see some commonalities here and as a running theme. If you haven't listened to those, that's fine too. I definitely would encourage you to listen to them, but it's not required that you listen to them in order to get anything out of this, this particular podcast. And if you're watching here on LinkedIn, then you can go back on my LinkedIn feed and watch the previous LinkedIn Lives that I've recorded on this. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and dig in? So I'm doing this in video format as well. So maybe you're also watching this on the YouTube channel, the Sales Quality YouTube channel. So let me just switch my screen so that we can look at the slides that I put together. So what I'll do is just spend a couple minutes just describing the race a little bit and the ultra marathon, the Western States 100, just to give you some context for this particular race and how I then how we then going to move into lessons from the trail. So the Western States 100, if you're watching online, you can see the map here, and I'll just describe it for you. That it starts in Squaw Valley, up in Lake Tahoe. So Squaw Village, Olympic Valley, as it's now more frequently known, starts at Olympic Valley up in the Sierra Nevadas, and then works its way down through ups and downs, through the mountains, down to a place called Auburn, California, which if you're in the Bay Area and you've driven from San Francisco, along I-80 out towards Reno up to Lake Tahoe, you know that Auburn is about kind of almost a little bit past the midway point. It's about 30 miles outside of Sacramento, California. It's in the foothills. It's an elevation of about 1,000 or 2,000 feet. So the course itself, as you can see, this elevation profile it starts over here. Let me see if I can grab my iPad pencil. So we're reading here from left to right. And again, if you're just listening in, what I'm doing is circling the starting point, which is about 6,000 feet. And the very first thing you do in this race is you climb up 2,500 feet over the top of the peak of Squaw Valley up to a place called Watson Monument. And then as you can see, the race goes down, and then there's ups and downs and ups and downs. Lots of climbing involved. There's about 18,000 feet of total ascent throughout the course of the race, and then almost 23,000 feet of descent. So it's a net downhill with lots of uphill, lots of bumps along the way. And one of the big things about this race was that this is, frankly, could very well be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This race is considered one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious, ultramarathon. It may not be the toughest one, for sure. There's much more difficult ultramarathons out there on the global circuit. However, this is the oldest 100-mile race, and it's oftentimes the one that most people that are doing ultra marathons, they have this on their bucket list. And so, the difficult part about getting in this race is that this past year, going in for the 2020 race, which was canceled, now the 2021 entrance, there were over 7,000 people that wanted to get one of 300 plus spots in this race. So there's a lottery system that's based on how many races you've done and for how long you've been in the lottery. So it's very, very difficult to get in. I was able to get a spot because our running club runs an aid station, and as part of the reward for running an aid station every year, we get one spot in the race, which is then allocated out to one of the club members based on merit. I've been very active in the club and active in the trail running community. And so I earned that spot through a lot of community service and personal time in the sort of racing community and in the local running club. So that's how I got in. Now, given that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, I also, it wasn't enough for me to just go ahead and finish the race. You have 30 hours to complete the 100-mile race. One of the things I wanted to do was complete this race in under 24 hours. So if you finish the entire race in under 30 hours, you get a bronze buckle, which is really cool. It's like a way of commemorating the experience you've gone through. And if you finish in under 24 hours, you get a silver buckle. My dad always jokes with me. He's like, "Wow, son, you run 100 miles and you get a buckle. Like, congratulations." It's really just a symbol of the hard work that goes into running these races. And so one of the things I decided is that, given my experience in ultramarathons and the fact that I know the trail pretty well, I really wanted to gun for this 24-hour time period, this sub 24 time. And so what you're looking at on my screen here, and for those listening in, what I did is I wrote on a piece of paper 23, 59, 59. 23, 59, 59. And I put that on my bathroom wall. So every morning when I walk into my bathroom to shave and get ready for the day, I look at this number. Every time I'm walking into that bathroom, it's there in front of me. And it's a reminder to me, like, am I doing something every day to hit this target of 23, 59, 59 or better? And where I got this idea was through a book called Leading with Character by Jim Loehr. So Jim is a sports psychologist and a coach to many athletes over the course of the last few decades. And one of the athletes that he coached was a guy named Dan Jansen. So Dan Jansen is a speed skater. Some of you might remember, depending on your age, in the late 80s and early 90s, Dan Jansen skated the 500 meter and 1,000 meter races. And one of the stories behind Dan Jansen is that right before one of his Olympic races, like the day of his Olympic races, he found out his sister had died from cancer. And in that race, he was the presumptive gold medalist, and he was supposed to go out and win this race and win the gold medal. But now he's dealing with this traumatic event in his life, and unfortunately, in that race, he ended up falling on the ice and didn't finish the race, and so he had to wait another 4 years. And he started working with Jim Loehr, and one of the things that Jim told him to do in his morning journal every day is he said to you, "I want in your training logs for the remainder of your time, I want you to write 35.99, and I want you to start believing that will be possible for Dan Jansen before the end of your career." So the reason 35.99 was significant is because that means what Dan Jansen was gunning for was to break 36 seconds in the 500 meter skate. So nobody had ever done this before. It was a barrier that nobody had broken. It's sort of like the 4-minute mile in running. And so every day in his morning journal, Dan would write down 35.99, 35.99. And so as I read this book, and I've gone through the workbook related to the book Leading with Character, I got this idea. And so I wrote the 23, 59, 59 on that sheet of paper and put it on my bathroom wall, my mirror. And I also, in my morning journal, I do morning pages every morning. I wake up and I write a couple pages of what's in my mind and what am I thinking about and what's the day going to look like and what are my worries and anxieties and concerns and what I'm excited about. It's just a practice I've picked up over the last 10 years. And so one of the things I've done in my personal journal was I would write down 23, 59, 59. And I would write that oftentimes repeatedly just across the page, 23, 59, 59. And it was just a way for me to remind myself, like, this is the goal. This is what I want to do. And it's a way to really, for me and my psyche, as I'm setting up the day, to think, okay, what am I doing today? What is one thing more that I can do today that's going to help me get closer to that big, hairy, audacious goal of 23, 59, 59. And I'll talk more about the historical success rate of runners in the race. And there's typically between 300 and 400 runners in this race, and there's certain percentages of those runners that tend to finish under 24 hours. And so for me, given my history in ultra running, it was going to be a stretch. I knew it was going to be a stretch. I've run 100-mile races in the past, never have I finished under 24 hours, and all 3 of those races would be considerably easier than the Western States 100, less climbing, and certainly terrain that a better ultra runner would have certainly finished in under 24 hours. So even though I've been very experienced in ultra running, I've never been that fast. I've never been fast enough to break 24 hours. So here I decided I was going to break 24 hours, at least go for the sub 24 hours in this very difficult race. Not the most difficult race out there by any stretch, but certainly very difficult with 18,000 feet of climbing and working through some altitude in the early 30 miles of the race. So that was that big, hairy, audacious goal for myself. And so this leads into some of the lessons from the trail. And before I do that, this one quote that I've repeated many times on the podcast or LinkedIn Lives. I mentioned this in some of my posts here, whereas the struggle is guaranteed, success is not. The struggle is guaranteed, success is not. I first heard this from Tom Bilyeu, who was the founder of Quest Nutrition. So if you've ever eaten a Quest bar, in fact, I have a cookie wrapper. I just ate one this morning. Big fan of the products. It's just a low carb, high protein option that replaces some of the other nutrition bars. And so he founded this company and then sold it for a lot of money. And so he struggled with this company for a long time. And now as a podcaster and a speaker, one of the things he often will talk about is that when you set these lofty goals for yourself, it's guaranteed that you are going to struggle. It's guaranteed it's going to be hard. And just because you struggle and just because you do the work it never means that you're going to get the success that you want. And so this, comes down to a lot of something I've talked about in the past. The journey is the joy. You need to really love the process, because the process, just because you go through it, doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. Now, there are things you can do to help stack the odds in your favor as much as possible, which I'll talk about with some of the lessons, the early lessons here, the first couple that I want to go through. But this is something that I've always remembered, and this is always part of my training, was that I needed to do the work, I needed to put in the effort, and even if I did those things, it did not mean that I was going to break this barrier. I wasn't even for sure that I could even finish the race in under 30 hours, let alone in under 24. There's hundreds of things that can go wrong in a race, which again we'll talk about more later on over the next couple of installments, that can certainly prevent any runner from finishing. There's injury, there's the weather that day, whether it's lots of snowpack on the trail or the opposite, which lots of heat, which is something we had that day. There's stomach issues that people get when you can't, your body can't digest food and you're trying to keep calories down that you need to keep in order to keep yourself moving. I mean, those are kinds of issues that can happen. There's a whole host of things that can happen in a race like this that can prevent somebody from finishing even though they cross the starting line. And even throughout training, as I found myself last year when I was training for a fastest known time attempt, just in training, I injured my ankle pretty badly, which ended up impacting my ability to finish this FKT I was attempting. So, there's all kinds of things that are going to happen when you're putting yourself out there. The struggle is guaranteed and success is not. So that was really a foundation for the way I was thinking about all of the work that was going into this race and hitting this big, hairy, audacious goal of a sub 24 time. So let's talk about some of the lessons. So the very first lesson for me, lesson from the trail, is when you're going to be tackling something big, and you can start to think about yourself, and if you haven't already, as a startup founder, thinking about what it's going to take to reach the impact, to make the impact that you want to make in your market for your customers with your company. One of the first lessons for me has always been to find experts. Like, we cannot go along on this journey on our own. It's just, there's too many other people that we can lean on and learn from over the years. And so for me, over the last year or so, I've been kind of interviewing in a way, or listening to experts out there in the ultra running community. Those include my circle of friends of mine that are more experienced than me in ultra running. And it also includes listening to podcasts and reading books from different ultra runners that have won races and have certainly had a lot of success in ultra running. And so for me, the person that I found as being my go-to expert in preparing for this race is a guy that's known affectionately as Bronco Billy. His name is Jeff Browning. So Jeff is, I hired Jeff as a coach to coach me in this race because I knew, I've trained for these races before. I've worked with coaches in the past. I've never worked with a specific ultra marathon coach. I've worked with CrossFit training coaches. I've worked with endurance racing coaches when I was doing Ironmans, but I've never worked with a running coach and specifically an ultra marathon coach. And so I've listened to Jeff on some podcast interviews that he'd done over the years, and I just really appreciated his approach to all aspects of how to prepare for ultra running, everything from diet and nutrition. He follows a low carb, high fat, ketogenic approach, paleo approach to diet. His training methodologies, lots of high intensity along with just hitting the trail for some miles. Doing some strength training is something that I've always prescribed to. So there's a lot of affinity. He's also 49 years old, so I'm 47. He's got kids at home, so he's balancing a lot of the things that I'm balancing. So just listening to him and reading about him and his approach, just I could feel like, okay, this person seems like the kind of person that would be a great expert for me to work on. Not only that, if you look at some of his history in the sport, and I'm showing his essentially his resume, everything from a 4-time top 10 finisher in this race at Western States, 4 straight years from 2016 to 2019. He's also won the Hard Rock 100 in 2018, which may possibly be the toughest ultra marathon. So in 2018, he ran the Western States 100, came in the top 10, and then 3 weeks later, he won the Hard Rock 100. In previous years, in 2016, he ran the Western States 100, came in first, then ran the Hard Rock 100, and he set what's called the double record, which is the fastest combined time in both of those races, because the turnaround of doing these 2 of these monster races in less than 3 weeks is really incredible. So he's just got a huge resume. So he's very experienced. He's also done races that I've done, obviously much faster than me. He's done the Zion 100 a couple times, and he's won it twice. I've done that race. He's won the Tarawera 100 in 2019. I did that race in 2020. So there's just a lot of overlap. And obviously he's very well experienced. And not only is he a great runner, but as a coach, he's coaching people like me every single day. And so he's got his endurance coaching program, and he works with close to 100 athletes, some of which are people who have won major events. A guy named Michael McKnight, who's won the Tahoe 200 race, a race that I've done. Michael McKnight is also a person who recently ran a 100-mile course without food. He did the 100 miles without any calories. He just drank water, had sodium, and he had trained his body to be fat adapted, so he could use the fat in his body as a way to fuel that run. And so Jeff's his coach. Jeff also coaches other pro athletes like himself. So he's just not only a great athlete himself, but he's been able to transfer the knowledge that he's accrued on his own to be able to coach people like me every single day. And so finding that as an expert allowed me to really push myself in training. He really pushed me in ways I never thought were possible. And in fact, one of the weeks in training that we put together, I ended up running 95.7 miles in a single week, which is more than almost double what I would consider a long week for me. In my past training, doing 40 or 50 miles in a week felt like a lot of miles to me because of the way I was training. He was able to help me gradually move up to doing almost 100 miles of training in a given week. And that was a week of 95.7 miles after doing 4 of the previous 5 weeks, I'd done over 60 miles a week. So like finding this expert and really helping me to identify what's possible, like putting together a training program, working with him on a weekly basis to figure out like how am I feeling? How's my body responding? What are my times? Am I trending up in some of the same courses that I'm doing, some of the same runs every single week? Am I getting in enough elevation gain every single week? So all of these things, when you find that expert, could really help you to achieve the kind of goals that you want to get. And again, there's no guarantee that just because I hired Jeff and did what he said, that he never guaranteed he's going to help me break 24 hours. Is all designed to help me get as close as possible, to remove variables, to stack the odds. And so for you and your startup, when you think about finding experts, I think one of the greatest things about being an entrepreneur is that many times we are self-reliant. and we say to ourselves like, hey, I can do this. We see opportunity and we're willing to put ourselves forward and take advantage of that opportunity. And it's oftentimes feels like a solo journey. And what's really critical is that we leverage the expertise of other people around you. And that expertise might be investors that you've worked with. They might be people that you can find like me in the sales world and say, hey, this person has gone through this journey a couple of times, taking early stage startups into growth stage and helping them ramp up sales. What can I learn from this person? What are some things that I might not even be thinking about? What are the unknown unknowns on the sales side of things? And the same goes across all parts of the business. It could be around finance. It could be around product development. It could be around hiring and recruiting and finding engineers and managing those engineers. Like, there's all different parts of your business. It's impossible for you as a startup founder to be an expert in all areas of running your business. Everything from capital raising to building product to selling product to managing team. There's like no one person is ever going to be an expert in those things. So one of the things you need to be able to do is really, drop the mask, and tell yourself like, look, I'm going to, suck it up here and not feel like I've got to know everything and figure things out on my own. There are experts out here who can help me. And let's find those mentors. Let's find those coaches. Let's find those expertise that can help me, because those are the people that are going to help me achieve and get at least, they can never guarantee that I'm going to hit the outcome that I want to hit, but they can certainly help me remove variables. They can help me prepare. They can help me plan. They can help me do and get closer to that goal than I would have gotten on my own. So that's like the number one lesson for me throughout my racing career. And even in my professional career, I've worked with experts, both business coaches in a couple of different parts of my life. And certainly with Sales Quality, I've worked with and still work with business coaches to help me make sure that I'm becoming the best leader I can be and building the best company that's possible. And also in my racing life, I've had endurance coaches as part of my racing life when I was doing Ironman triathlons. I've had them when I was doing other races. And again, as I mentioned, this is the first time I've hired and worked with an ultra marathon coach. And in all of those cases, when I found those coaches, they all helped me achieve things that I would not have been able to do on my own. So number one lesson for me, lesson from the trail, is go and find experts. Go and find experts. So just taking a little drink of water. All right, so let's talk about lesson number 2. So I set this big goal, 23, 59, 59, the big hairy, the BHAG as it's known. And that's important. Like, you got to set the vision. You got to set the goal. You got to say, like, this is the thing I'm gunning for. That's important. The second thing you got to do, though, is you got to do the work, right? Just saying, oh, I want to have this outcome. I want to be the market leader in this particular industry for this kind of product. It's a wonderful, vision. It's a wonderful mission to have. But you got to, once you set that vision, you got to figure out how do you fill the gap from where you are to where you want to go. And the way you do that is to do the work. You've got to be willing to do the work. And I'll talk more about that, specifically as it relates to startups and sales in just a couple of minutes. For me, as I was preparing for this race, I've often used January 4th as kind of the beginning of my training for this particular race. It's really a race that I've been preparing for the last almost 7 years since I decided I wanted to get into this race and do this race. But really, specifically for this race, the training began for me on January 4th. And when I talk about doing the work every single day, I've done other videos and I've done other podcasts about getting up early at 4 a.m. and going out on the trail on a Wednesday morning. I've talked about, in one case where I did 5 workouts in 50 hours, just 2 a day workouts for a couple of days in order to get myself, to that next level. And when we talk about do the work, there's lots of different ways that you can do the work. And this is a part of where a good coach comes in. One of the things that Jeff had all of his athletes do in March is what he called the March Madness Giddy Up Strength Challenge. So as just, running is of course part of the training, nutrition is part of the training, mobility is part of the training, so is strength. And so one of the things he did in March is he said, look, I want all of you all of my athletes, I want you to do this March Madness every day. It's at least 20 minutes of strength and conditioning. And so he put together a regimen of core body work, abs and your core, as well as legs and glutes, to get your legs stronger, to get your core stronger. So it included things like crunches and sit-ups and oblique presses and wall sits and calf raises and planks and step back lunges and all these, basically all body weight movements. There were no weights involved, no barbells, no dumbbells involved. It was all body weight stuff. And he basically gave us this checklist. He said, every day I want you to do these things. And that's what I mean by doing the work, because when you commit to doing something like that every single day, you should do the full circuit. It takes about 45 minutes. He said you could substitute a 45-minute doing the full circuit with at least 20 minutes of other strength work. But the idea is like committing to do it every single day. And in that commitment of every single day is really about making the time. And in some of those cases in March, March is a really busy month. Lots of months are busy when you're running a business. But for me specifically, when I'm running my business, March is a really busy month for us. And we got companies that are coming out of Q1. They're starting to close some funding. They're thinking about the rest of the year. They're oftentimes have early in the year board meetings, and the board has decided, like, look, you got to get some help with sales. You got to figure out how to get some more repeatability. And so March just tends to be a really busy month for us. And so when it comes down to doing the work, oftentimes that meant, like, between Zoom meetings, I'm doing planks on my office floor. I'm doing crunches. I'm doing 4 or 5 exercises in the 5 minutes or 10 minutes I have between meetings right there on my office floor. It just means doing the work. It would mean sometimes getting up really early in the morning, doing a run early in the morning, and then in the afternoon, oftentimes when I might least feel like, after being drained from the day and sitting on Zoom with Zoom fatigue and managing my son from home and his school, and my wife and I balancing her work and my work, sometimes it's 4:30 in the afternoon. The last thing you feel like doing is hitting the garage for 30 or 40 minutes to do, air squats and planks and wall sits, right? But doing the work means, like, hey, I'm committed to doing this. And doing the work means you're going to do that kind of work every single day. Another example of, like, doing the work is, after building up several months of training since January, one of the kind of hallmark training runs that a lot of people do is a run from a place called Forest Hill to a place called Last Chance and back. So it's about a 37-mile run, and it includes about 10,000 feet of elevation change. And a friend of mine, 2 friends of mine, we talked about doing this run way back in March. We said, hey, in May, when we ramped up our training enough, we want to do this run as one of our big training runs. And gearing up for that and spending all day on the trail, putting yourself through 37 miles, more than a third of the race, just to go out and see the trail and see those climbs and put together, a day that's going to simulate race environments. That's another example of doing the work. A third example of doing the work is, if you're looking at this on the screen, one of the things you can see on the right-hand side is weekly vertical. So one of the things Jeff asked me to do going into May, he's like, I want you to do 10,000 feet of climbing every week. I want you to get at least 10,000 feet of vertical, 10 to 12,000 feet of vertical. And so I started tracking that. And as you can see here, for 4 out of 5 weeks, I hit 11,000, 11,700, 12,700. Eventually took a short break and in my training in order to kind of recover. Then the following week coming back and hitting 11,500 feet, and then scaling back a little bit. And then the next week after that was, which you can't see here, was actually 13,000. So again, like, doing the work. It sucks. You got to go out and you're just, doing climbs. That's what we mean by doing the work. Here's an example of 1 week in May where I'm doing multiple workouts. This is the week where I did 95.7 miles, 95.8 miles in total training. The last thing I'll share in terms of doing the work, I've got the number 45 here on my screen. So why the number 45? Well, I went back since March 1st, since that March Madness Challenge, and I looked at how many days of training did I do at least 2 workouts in a day. So a run and strength, or 2 runs in a day. And from March 1st through into early June, there's 45 days where I did 2 workouts a day. Like, that takes some work, right? And it's just committing to it and doing the work, even when you don't feel like doing it. And an example would be like doing a 7-mile run in the morning and then a 45-minute strength workout in the afternoon. Or in some cases, maybe doing a longer run on a Wednesday where I did 12.5 miles in the morning and then 45 minutes of strength work in the afternoon. Like this is an example of doing the work. And what I mean, and this means for you as a startup, when I talk about doing the work, again, like set the goal, set the big expectation, set the big, hairy, audacious goal of, being the market leader and inventing an entire new category. Those are important, but you got to do the work every single day. You got to do your prospecting every single day. You got to do your lead generation. You got to review your sales calls to figure out how you're doing and how you can improve. You've got to go out and talk to your current customers and ask them what do they like and how can you improve. You've got to be able to look critically at what you're doing and saying like, am I doing enough? Am I doing everything I could be doing? And this, of course, folds into why you want to find experts, because a lot of times just doing work doesn't mean that you're doing the right work or doing enough work, right? There's the difference between staying busy and working on doing your busyness versus working on the business, right? So you got to do the work every single day, even when you don't feel like it. If it's the end of the day and you haven't done your 20 prospecting emails, or you haven't done your 20 outbounds, or you haven't done your cold calls that week, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, that's when you got to do the work. And if you don't do the work, it doesn't matter how big and grandiose your plans are and how much you could like to talk about the outcome you want to get to. If you don't do the work, you're just not going to get there. And again, remember, the struggle is guaranteed. Success is not. Just because you do the work doesn't mean you're going to get to that outcome, but it's a necessary condition to do the work. It's just not sufficient condition to get to where you want to go. So that was lesson number 2. So lesson number 3 from the trail, and then we'll call it a day today. I wrote down prepare, plan, visualize. Prepare, plan, visualize. So what exactly does that mean? Well, going back to that race course, I've run a good chunk of this trail over the course of the last couple of years. I've run the entire course from end to end at some point, except for one short 2-mile stretch. And in my training for this particular race, I ran 93 of the 100 miles at some point throughout training. So I know the trail and I know what it looks like. And one of the things that Jeff encouraged me to do is to constantly visualize running the race. Visualize what it's going to take in order to hit that sub 24-hour time. And and when I use the word visualize, I'm not just like magic juju kind of like, oh, just like, visualize it and it will come true kind of thing. It's more about getting your mind ready and seeing and rehearsing mentally. What's it going to be like in that hard climb when you're coming out of El Dorado or you're coming out of the climb at Swinging Bridge up to Devil's Thumb? It's in the middle of the day. It's going to be close to 100 degrees. You got to climb over 1,500 feet in less than a mile and a half. Like, it's going to suck. But visualizing that and knowing what that's going to feel like ahead of time, visualizing which parts of the trail might seem like they're runnable but actually really aren't because they're really rocky or really steep, and being prepared to slow down in the areas where you can speed up. What's it going to feel like when you need to push a little bit? So visualizing that is one of the things I did almost every night, especially the last 2 months leading up to the race, is I'd go to bed at night and I would just imagine myself running these different sections of the trail. And what was that going to be like? What were my times going to be? What was my pace going to be? What was I going to feel like? Because you've got to, every day you've got to feel what it's going to be like to do the work and execute on the plan that you're going to build. And so when you look at this, this race course, the ups and downs, there's going to be parts that are fast and parts that are slow. And one of the things I did in order to plan and prepare is, because I've done so many parts of the trail in training, I know roughly what my pace is going to be in each of those sections. And so what you see on your screen here, and I'll describe it for people listening in, this is a pace, what I call a pace card. So on the left-hand side, these are all the different aid stations, and these are the times by which I'm planning to hit those different checkpoints in the race. And those are based on my training. So again, when you've done the work and you know what it's going to take and how fast or how slow each of those sections are going to take, that gives you the data to visualize and know exactly how long should it take you to get from Lion Ridge to Red Star Ridge, or how fast can you go on that downhill from Robinson down to Swinging Bridge, or how slow is it going to be when you're climbing through the canyons at Devil's Thumb and El Dorado and trying to get up to Forest Hill for the last 38 miles. They all work together, because if you haven't done the work, it's going to be hard for you to know what the race plan is going to look like. And the third thing that I did as part of my preparation is I put together a pacing and race manual. So here on my screen is just a couple screenshots from that. And that includes all of my nutrition and hydration. I wrote down, I didn't just say to myself like, oh yeah, I'm going to drink some Tailwind and make sure I take salt and drink a lot of water. I sat down and I bullet pointed it out. This is exactly how, when I get to every aid station, I'm going to drink a half a liter of water and pop a salt pill. This is how many calories I'm going to need between each station. This is how I'm going to carry the bottles in my front loading on my backpack and have extras in my backpack in the back. For my pacers, which I'll talk about in another installment, how to pace me, like what to expect, how to stay positive with me. I'm a kind of person that responds well to positive encouragement, and I'm not the kind of person that needs a drill sergeant out there. Explaining to my pacers like, hey, I have a tendency to do what's called Superman, which means you kick a rock and you end up falling over. And this is why I have a brace on my wrist right now. 2 weeks after the race, my wrist got pretty messed up because I fell a couple times. Telling my pacers like, hey, this is going to happen. And when this happens, you're not allowed to ask me, am I okay? My job as the runner is to get up, dust off, make sure I'm okay myself, and then keep moving. So again, like planning and preparing for every possible detail in the race is critical. And it's the same when you think about your startup, when you think about growing your sales and you talk about preparation and planning, like going into every product demo. Did you really prepare? Did you rehearse for that demo? Did you collect all the needs from the key buyers that are going to be in this meeting to make sure that your demo is about their problem and not the product? Are you doing the right account planning? Have you gone through LinkedIn? Have you gone through the org chart? Have you read through the annual reports? Have you read through the press releases? Are you really clear about the director level objectives that your customers, your target customers, want to get to? Are you prepared? Have you planned? Have you visualized how that demo is going to go? Or have you talked through what happens when you're going to get the objections that you know you're going to get? Not just, and I talked about this in some of the pre-race lessons from the trail, not just like, oh, if they ask us about integrations, I'll just tell them about our API docs. Like, no, that's not enough. You got to sit down and script it out and make sure that they're clear about what is an API, what are SDKs. Do your customers really know what those mean? Walk them through. Walk yourself through how you're going to answer every single question and objection. Going into every meeting, what are the outcomes that you want? What are the next steps going to be? What are the open loops and the next steps coming out of every sales meeting? Have you sat down and planned that and prepared that and visualized that? Because you haven't done that for the sales call, the chances are it's not going to go the way you want it to go. And the same with interviewing and recruiting. Are you prepared? You're going to go out and hire that VP of sales, and you're working with a recruiter, and the recruiter put this person in front of you that you think could be a good fit. Have you planned for that? Have you prepared for that? Are you willing to put in the time and the effort to make the most out of that interview, to really recruit that person, and also make sure you're asking the right questions to that person to make sure that they're a good fit for you? So planning and preparing and visualizing is all part of that sales process. It's all part of that company building process. And if you don't make the time to do these things, if you don't sketch out every single detail that you can think of, if you haven't really visualized, like, what's it going to take for me to get to these different checkpoints by when? What's that course going to be like for us? What's this next section of the journey going to be over the next 6 months, the next 9 months, the next 12 months to get us from $1 million in sales to $3 million in sales? Or to get us from 100K in sales to the first million? What's it going to take for us to get there? Have I planned? Have I prepared? Have I visualized what that's going to be like? And then have I communicated that with the team around me? And so these first 3 lessons, finding experts, doing the work, and then planning, prepare, and visualize, you can start to see how they all come together. Because the experts are going to help you figure out what is the right work. And then when you do the right work, that's going to help you plan and prepare and visualize for those sales calls on how you're going to do your outbound strategy to get more leads, to think through customer success and implementation with all of your customers and all of your prospects. That's helping them visualize a view of the future, what it's going to be like, and how you're going to help them get successful and reach the objectives they want to get, and the objectives that you're promising them as part of your sales. So these first 3 I kind of like to group together as the first 3 lessons from the trail. So I think that's a pretty good stopping point for now. I'll probably do 2 or 3 more of these, part 2, part 3 in these post-race. But as you can see, if you've listened to some other podcasts, you'll see some similarities in the themes. And, this whole idea of like you're running your ultra marathon. When you're running your business, you're running your startup, you're growing your startup, you are running an ultra marathon. and there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be peaks and valleys, and you've got to be prepared to go fast when it's time to go fast. You got to be prepared to go slow when you hit those big climbs or you hit those dips. Just know that's all part of the journey. No ultra marathon that's worth doing is going to be an easy course. The reason that I wanted to do this race is because it is hard, because it is prestigious, because it's one of those things that, as you're doing ultra marathons, you want to just do any 100-mile race. You want to do the hard ones. You want to do the ones that are the big challenges. And for me, this is a big challenge, and there's going to be ups and downs and ebbs and flows. And by finding experts and doing the work and planning and preparing and visualizing, that's one of the things that helped me to get closer to that goal that I wanted to hit of a sub 24 time, not just finishing the race, but doing it in under 24 hours. So in part 2 and 3, we'll talk more about the specific race itself. Now that we've gotten me, talked about all the planning and preparation and training that's going into hitting the starting line. That in itself is a big goal, because there's 100 things that could happen that would prevent you from getting to the starting line itself, let alone running the race successfully and hitting that finish line down the road. So listen, if you've gotten this far, if you're watching this on LinkedIn Live or you're listening to the podcast and you want to get some help with some of this with your startup, maybe you just need to you feel like you're at a place where you need to get some expertise. You need to figure out what the unknown unknowns are, or what the known unknowns are, or the unknown knowns, however you want to think about it. But you just don't know how to actually build the process that's going to take that and help you make that big leap, or help you take that next step in your journey. Maybe you just need help with planning and preparing and figure out what does that next section of your journey look like in your startup. So if any of this is resonating with you and you want to get some help and you just want to get somebody, a second set of eyes on your plan, on your ultra marathon, then chances are, either I or somebody on my team can help. So one of the things that we do every single day at Sales Quality is help early stage, growth stage companies to ramp up and scale up their sales process. So if you want us to have a look at your situation, brainstorm some ideas, help you figure out if or how we can help you out, then all you got to do, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, you can just comment below and type the word journey, and I will reach out to you and make sure we get some time on the calendar. You can also DM me here on LinkedIn, send a message, or you can shoot me an email, scott@salesqualia, sales, Qualia.com, salesqualia.com. You can just type the word private or even the word journey into the email. That just lets me know that you've listened to this particular episode and you want to get some help with your journey, your ultra marathon as you're ramping up and scaling up. And again, we'll get some time on the calendar and figure out if or how we can help you out. Look at your situation, brainstorm some ideas, and then put together a plan, and then decide if it's a good fit for us both. All right, that's it for now. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening in. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next couple of installments in these post-race startup lessons from the trail. And in the meantime, this is Scott Sambucci signing off. I'll see ya.